All right, let's do this. Time to decode the 2024 election. We're diving deep into the policies of Harris and Trump, using this crazy detailed comparison table as our guide. Think of it like peeking into their secret plans for the country's future. And trust me, things get interesting.
It's really fascinating to see how different their approaches are. You can tell they have very different views on the role of government and how to handle the big issues facing the country.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's start with taxes. Because taxes, well, they impact everyone. Right off the bat, we see a huge difference when it comes to corporate taxes. Harris is planning to bump the top corporate tax rate up to 28%. That's up from 21% where it is now. Plus, she wants to raise taxes on stock buybacks. That's a pretty big move.
Yeah, it is. Her thinking seems to be that corporations got big tax breaks recently, and now it's their turn to chip in more, to fund social programs and help with income inequality. But the risk, of course, is that businesses might not like it. They might say higher taxes will slow down investment and hiring.
Right, so it's all about finding that balance, getting enough tax revenue for the government, but also not hurting the economy.
Exactly. It's like the oldest debate in economics. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens if Harris wins. Now, Trump wants to do something totally different with corporate taxes. He's saying he wants to cut the rate even more, down to 20%, and even lower for companies that manufacture in the U.S.
Wow. It's like they're playing two different games here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about individual taxes now. Harris is really focused on giving breaks to lower and middle income families. She's proposing to expand those child tax credits and make the earned income tax credit bigger too. That's basically a tax break for working families, low to moderate income. So her plan is all about giving working families more money.
Yeah, and this is part of a bigger trend. All around the world, governments are trying to help families more, provide that safety net and reduce income inequality. It's because so many families are struggling financially, governments are trying to help.
Okay, and what about Trump? Well, his plan is to make the tax cuts from 2017 permanent. You remember the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? It lowered taxes for everyone, businesses and individuals, but it really helped wealthy Americans the most.
Right, so just like with corporate taxes, we're seeing two very different philosophies here. But there's one thing they both agree on. Both candidates say they want to lower drug prices, although their plans for how to do it are probably going to be different.
Yeah, it's good to see some common ground on that. Okay, get ready for things to heat up, because now we're talking about trade, and specifically trade with China.
Trade is always a tough topic, especially when it comes to China. They've become, a huge competitor to the U.S.
For sure. So Harris wants to be very specific. She's talking about tariffs and investment restrictions.
Yeah.
But only for companies and industries that threaten national security. It's like she's choosing her battles carefully.
Yeah, it seems like she wants to protect American interests, but without starting, like, a full-blown trade war. It's a more careful approach.
But Trump, well, he's not exactly known for being subtle. He's talking about a 60% tariff on everything from China. Everything. And get this, he's even said he might pull the U.S. out of the World Trade Organization, the WTO. Can you believe that?
Wow, that would be a huge change. Leaving the WTO could really shake up global trade. Other countries might put tariffs on American goods too. And that could lead to a trade war. Nobody knows what would happen then.
It's like he's tossing a bomb into the global trade system.
Yeah, it would definitely change things up. It would be interesting to see how other countries react and what the long-term effects on the economy would be.
All right, so we've tackled taxes and trade. Let's do a quick run through some other important topics, starting with the Federal Reserve. Now, this might seem a little boring, but it actually affects everyone. The Fed controls interest rates, and interest rates affect, well, everything, like mortgages, car loans, you name it.
Right, and the Federal Reserve is supposed to be independent, free from political pressure, so they can make decisions that are best for the economy, not just what politicians want.
Right, and Harris seems fine with that. But Trump has a history of disagreeing with the Fed, especially when he thinks interest rates are too high.
Yeah, this is something to watch. If the Fed becomes politicized, it could make the markets nervous, and that could destabilize the economy.
Okay, next up is healthcare, another big one. We talked about drug prices already, but let's look at the whole picture. Harris is a big supporter of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. She wants to build on that by creating a public option for health insurance, so people would have the choice to sign up for a government-run plan. She also wants lower drug prices and better access to mental health care.
This is all about, the idea that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. A lot of developed countries are moving in this direction.
Okay, and Trump, well, he's tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act many times. He's more into free market solutions, like those health savings accounts, and making insurance companies compete more.
Right. So this is a more conservative approach to healthcare. It focuses on individual choice. But, there are questions. Would it really lower costs? And what would happen to people with pre-existing conditions?
So two very different visions for healthcare. Okay, let's switch gears to energy and renewables.
This is an area where things are changing fast. All around the world, everyone's moving towards cleaner energy because of climate change and, wanting to be less reliant on fossil fuels.
Right. Harris is totally on board with this shift. She wants the U.S. to have net zero emissions by 2045. And she wants to rejoin the Paris Agreement. Plus, she's talking about big investments in things like solar and wind power.
So she's definitely making clean energy a top priority.
Now, Trump's energy plan is completely different. He's a huge supporter of oil and gas, and he's skeptical about climate change. He might even try to undo some of the green energy stuff from that Inflation Reduction Act.
So his approach is focused on those traditional energy sources and less on the environmental impact.
Yeah, it's a big contrast in how they see the future of energy.
Yeah, for sure. It comes down to different priorities and different beliefs about how urgent the climate change issue is.
And on that note, we'll pause here for now, but don't go anywhere. There's a lot more to cover. We'll be back with part 2 of our deep dive soon.
Welcome back to our deep dive, into the 2024 election. We're still comparing Harris and Trump's policies.
And as we go deeper, it's becoming really clear that this isn't just about, different policies. It's about two totally different ways of thinking, about what the government should do, about individual freedom versus what we do together as a society, about how to tackle the biggest problems we're facing.
Exactly. These are really big choices. Choosing one path or the other could lead to very different outcomes for the country.
It's like we have two maps of the future, and they lead to totally different places.
And ultimately, it's up to each voter to decide which path they want to take.
Okay, so let's talk about education. This is another area where Harris and Trump have very different ideas.
Education is super important. It's how people get ahead in life and how our society as a whole becomes more equal.
Totally. Harris has made college affordability a big part of her campaign. She is proposing free tuition public colleges for families making under $125,000 a year. That would be a huge help for so many students who are struggling with debt. She also wants to double the Pell Grant, which helps low-income students pay for college.
So her focus is on making college possible for everyone, no matter how much money their family has. It's about investing in education to create a stronger workforce and a fairer society.
Makes sense. Now, Trump hasn't really given a lot of details about his plans for college, but based on what he said before, he seems to like the idea of school choice. And he might try to reduce how much the federal government is involved in education.
That's a more market-based approach. It's about giving parents more choices. But it raises questions about funding for public schools and whether everyone would really have access to good education no matter where they live or how much money their family has.
It's a tough issue with strong opinions on both sides. Okay, let's move on to climate change.
This is one of the biggest problems facing the world. It affects everything, our environment, our economy, even our health and safety.
And it's an issue where Harris and Trump see things very differently. Harris is making climate change a top priority. She wants the U.S. to be at net zero emissions by 2045. That means we wouldn't be adding to the problem anymore. She also wants to rejoin the Paris Agreement. That's the international agreement to fight climate change. And she wants to put a lot of money into renewable energy and green infrastructure.
It sounds like she's really serious about tackling this problem.
Totally. Now, Trump has been skeptical about climate change in the past. He's even called it a hoax. He might try to roll back some of the environmental rules that were put in place by Obama and even during his own presidency.
That would be a big shift in direction, and it would worry a lot of people who are concerned about the environment and public health.
It's a big difference in how they see the issue. Harris is listening to the scientists and taking action. Trump seems more focused on economic growth, even if it means putting the environment at risk.
It's a debate that's not going away.
All right, let's go back to healthcare for a minute. We talked about drug prices before, but there's so much more to talk about.
Healthcare is so important to people. It's about whether you can get the care you need, whether you can afford it, and whether the care is good quality.
Absolutely. So Harris is a big fan of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. She wants to add a public option to that so people could choose a government-run health plan if they wanted to. Plus, she wants to make prescription drugs cheaper and make sure mental health care is available to everyone.
This is the idea that everyone deserves health care. It's a right, not a luxury. It's a common idea in a lot of other developed countries.
Makes sense. Now, Trump has tried to get rid of Obamacare. over and over. He's more into letting the free market handle healthcare. He likes health savings accounts. And he thinks that if insurance companies compete more, prices will go down.
So this is a more conservative view. It puts more emphasis on personal responsibility.
It's a fundamental difference in how they think about healthcare. Okay, let's move on to gun control.
This is always a sensitive topic. People have strong feelings about it.
Definitely. So Harris is in favor of stricter gun control laws. She wants to make it harder for people to get guns, especially people who shouldn't have them. She wants universal background checks. That means checking everyone who buys a gun, even at gun shows and private sales. She also supports banning assault weapons and closing those loopholes that let people buy guns without background checks.
So she's really concerned about gun violence. She sees it as a public health crisis.
Exactly. Trump has a very different view. He's a big supporter of the Second Amendment. He's against any new gun control laws. And he's even said that maybe the answer is to have more people carrying guns, the good guys with guns.
That's a common argument from gun rights advocates. They say that criminals will always find ways to get guns. So the focus should be on stopping criminals, not on taking guns away from law-abiding citizens.
It's a debate that's been going on for a long time, and it's not going away anytime soon. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about immigration.
Immigration is a big issue. It's about economics, it's about culture, it's about who we are as a country.
Totally. So Harris wants to make it easier for undocumented immigrants to become citizens. She's talking about a pathway to citizenship for people who meet certain requirements, like paying taxes, passing background checks, learning English. She thinks it's the right thing to do, and she also thinks it would help the economy.
So she's taking a more welcoming approach to immigration. She sees immigrants as contributing to our society.
Right. Trump has a much tougher stance on immigration.
Yeah.
He wants to build a wall on the border with Mexico, he wants to deport more people, and he wants to limit legal immigration too.
So he sees immigration as a threat to our security and our jobs.
It's two very different perspectives on a really important issue.
And it's an issue that affects millions of people.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here in part 2, but there's still more to discuss. Welcome back for the final part of our 2024 election deep dive. It's been quite a journey exploring all these policies, comparing Harris and Trump, seeing how different their visions are.
Yeah, we've seen that it's not just about specific policies. It's about really different ways of thinking about the role of government, about how much freedom individuals should have versus, the needs of society as a whole, about the best ways to solve the country's problems.
It's like we're choosing between two totally different paths.
Exactly. And now, as we wrap up, let's think about what we've learned and what it means for you, the listener.
We've talked about so much: taxes, trade, healthcare, education, climate change, gun control, immigration. And we've seen how all these issues are connected. What we do in one area affects everything else.
It's all about seeing the big picture, how the pieces fit together.
And realizing that there are no easy answers. These are complicated problems.
It's about making tough choices, thinking about the consequences, and deciding what's most important to us.
So we've seen that Harris generally wants the government to be more active, in solving social and economic problems. She's focused on helping people, making sure everyone has a fair shot.
She believes the government can make things better, create a more just society.
And Trump generally wants the government to do less. He's all about individual freedom, free markets, less regulation.
He thinks people and businesses do best when the government stays out of the way.
It's that classic debate, big government versus small government.
It's a debate that's been going on forever.
And it's really at the heart of this election.
Ultimately, it's your decision as a voter. Your vote is your chance to say what you think is best for the country.
So as we head into this election, stay informed, talk to people, think about what's important to you.
Don't just listen to what the candidates say. Look at what they've done in the past. Think about what might happen if they win.
Make your decision based on what you think is best for the country. And for yourself.
Because this election isn't just about choosing a president. It's about choosing what kind of country we want to be.
It's about who we are and what we stand for.
Well said.
So that's it for our deep dive. We hope you found it helpful and maybe even got you thinking a little bit.
It's been a pleasure.
Remember, knowledge is power. And informed citizens are what make a democracy work. So stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those deep dives going. Thanks for listening.